Most people think the worst thing that can happen on a trail is getting lost. They're wrong. Getting lost means you still have a chance, still have options, still have hope that someone will find you. But what happens when you're not lost, when you know exactly where you are, and something finds you first? Case file 010. Now open. 3 hikers. 3 trails that should have been safe. 3 encounters that proved nature isn't the only thing waiting in the woods. These are their stories, told exactly as they happened, with nothing added and nothing left out. I should have turned around the second I saw that truck, but I didn't, because I thought I was helping. This happened in October of 2022. I was hiking the Ridgeline Trail in the Cascade Range, about 40 miles east of Seattle. Popular trail, well-maintained. I'd done it probably 15 times before. The weather was perfect that day. Mid-50s, clear skies, light breeze, the kind of conditions that bring out dozens of hikers on a Saturday afternoon. I'd started around 1 p.m., planning to do the full 8-mile loop and be back at my car by 5. The trail was moderately busy when I started. Passed maybe 20 people in the first 2 miles. Families with kids, older couples with trekking poles, college students with oversized backpacks, normal weekend crowd. Around mile 4, the trail climbs to a ridgeline viewpoint. Most people turn back there. The remaining 4 miles loop through denser forest with no significant views, so casual hikers skip it. Time 1,000 meters. I prefer that section precisely because it's emptier. More solitude, better chance of seeing wildlife. Just you and the woods. I reached the viewpoint around 2:30, took a short break, drank some water, ate a protein bar, then continued on the loop's second half. Within 10 minutes, I hadn't seen another person. The trail narrowed. Trees pressed closer. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy at a lower angle, creating longer shadows. That's when I saw the truck. It was parked at a junction I'd never noticed before. White pickup. Parks Department logo on the door. Driver's side open. Keys still in the ignition. Engine off, but radio crackling with static. The truck looked wrong somehow. Not modern like the vehicles I'd seen park staff driving. This was older, 80s model maybe. Paint faded and chipped, rust spots around the wheel wells. But it had the official logo, had government plates, had all the markers of a legitimate Parks Department vehicle. I called out, "Hello, anyone need help?" No response, just the static from the radio and wind through the trees. I walked closer to the truck, looked inside through the open door. The interior was cluttered. Fast food wrappers on the passenger seat, empty coffee cups in the holders. Maps spread across the dashboard, but they were hand-drawn, not official topographic maps. On the dashboard, a clipboard with papers attached. I leaned in to see what they said. Lists of names, dozens of them, handwritten in cramped script. Next to each name, dates, times, and brief descriptions. Male, late 20s, solo, 2:45 p.m. Female, early 30s, with dog, 11:20, couple, both 50s, 4:10 p.m. The dates went back months, all on this trail, all documenting people. My throat tightened. This wasn't normal trail maintenance documentation. Then I noticed the last entry on the current page. Fresh ink, still slightly wet. Male, early 30s, solo, orange jacket, 2:47 p.m. I was wearing an orange jacket. The time was 2:53. Someone had logged me 6 minutes ago. I backed away from the truck quickly, pulse accelerating. Looked around the immediate area. The junction where the truck was parked had a narrow side trail I'd never noticed before. It wasn't on any official map I'd seen. No trail marker, no signage, just a beaten path disappearing into denser trees. Fresh boot prints led down that path. Recent. Within the last hour, based on how the edges hadn't dried yet. I should have returned to the main trail immediately. Should have hiked back to the trailhead and reported this to actual park staff. But I didn't, because part of me thought, stupidly, that maybe this was a legitimate worker who'd gotten injured or lost on this side trail. Maybe they needed help. Maybe that's why the truck was abandoned with the door open. So I followed the boot prints. The side trail was barely maintained, overgrown with ferns and low branches. I had to duck constantly to avoid getting hit in the face. After about 5 minutes of walking, I found the first marker. Wooden stake driven into the ground, hand-carved arrow pointing forward. But it wasn't an official trail marker. This was crude, homemade. The arrow scratched into the wood with something sharp. I should have stopped there. Should have recognized that unofficial trail markers meant someone had created their own path. Someone who didn't want people using official trails. But I kept going. Time 800 meters. The boot prints continued. The markers appeared every 100 feet or so, always pointing deeper into the forest, always leading away from the main trail system. After 10 minutes, I realized I could no longer hear the sounds from the main trail. No distant voices of other hikers, no dogs barking, just wind through trees and my own movement through underbrush. The forest had become noticeably quieter too. Fewer birds, no squirrels. That absence of animal sounds you sometimes get in places where something's wrong. Then I heard the radio, static, crackling through trees ahead. The same sound from the truck, but closer now. I slowed down, moving more carefully, trying to see ahead through the dense vegetation. The side trail opened into a small clearing, maybe 20 feet across, surrounded by thick undergrowth that would be nearly impossible to push through. In the center of the clearing, a man stood with his back to me. He wore a Parks Department uniform, green pants, tan shirt, wide-brimmed ranger hat, utility belt with various tools. He held a radio to his mouth, speaking into it, though I couldn't make out the words over the static. Relief flooded through me. "Hey," I called out. "Are you okay? I found your truck back at the trail junction." The man stopped speaking into his radio, but he didn't turn around. Just stood there, motionless, facing away from me. "Sir?" I tried again. "Do you need assistance?" Slowly, he raised the radio back to his mouth. His voice came through distorted, filtered through static. "Male, early 30s, solo, orange jacket, followed the markers, currently in clearing 7. My stomach dropped. He was describing me, into the radio. But there was no response from the other end, just static. He was talking to no one? "Who are you talking to?" I asked, voice shakier than I wanted. The man finally turned around. His face was wrong, not disfigured or injured, just wrong. Features that looked almost normal but slightly off in ways I couldn't quite identify. Eyes that didn't blink at the right intervals. Smile that stretched just a fraction too wide. "You followed the markers," he said, voice flat and emotionless. "That means you're supposed to be here." Supposed to be here for what? He tilted his head at an unnatural angle. "The program. We've been documenting hikers on this trail for 7 months, observing patterns, recording data. You fit the profile we're looking for." "What program? Who's we?" "The markers are a selection mechanism," he continued, ignoring my questions. "Only certain people notice them. Only certain people follow them. Those are the ones we need." My hand started shaking. This wasn't a Parks employee. This was something else entirely. "I'm leaving," I said, backing toward the trail I'd come from. "You can't leave clearing 7 until processing is complete," he said, taking a step toward me. It's part of the protocol." "I don't give a damn about your protocol," I shot back, turning to run. But the trail entrance I'd used to enter the clearing was gone, just dense undergrowth, impossible to push through without serious effort. The path had somehow disappeared. I spun around, searching for any other way out. The man hadn't moved from his position. He raised the radio again. "Subject showing expected confusion at clearing reconfiguration," he reported into the static. "Attempting to locate exit. Psychological baseline consistent with previous subjects." "What the hell are you?" I demanded. "A maintenance worker," he replied simply. "Maintaining the selection process. You've been selected. Now we need to determine your category." He reached to his utility belt, pulling out what looked like a handheld device, some kind of scanner with a small screen and antenna. "This won't hurt," he said, walking slowly toward me. "We just need to collect some readings." I looked desperately around the clearing. The undergrowth was thick, but not impossible. I picked what looked like the thinnest section and charged toward it. Branches tore at my clothes and face as I forced my way through. Thorns caught my jacket. Ferns whipped against my legs. But I kept pushing forward, desperate to get away from that clearing and that thing pretending to be a park's employee. Behind me, I heard his voice, still calm and emotionless. "Subject has breached clearing perimeter. Displaying non-compliant behavior. Recommend category adjustment." I didn't look back, just kept crashing through the undergrowth, ignoring the scratches and tears, focused only on getting distance between me and that clearing. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 2 minutes, I burst out onto a trail. Not the side trail I'd followed to the clearing. The main trail. The legitimate, maintained, safe trail. I'd somehow pushed through the undergrowth in the right direction to intersect it. I ran, didn't stop to check my map or orient myself. Just picked a direction that felt like it led toward the trailhead and ran as fast as the terrain allowed. After 5 minutes of running, I passed 2 hikers coming the opposite direction. Seeing other people, normal people, almost made me collapse with relief. I must have looked insane, scratched up, jacket torn, gasping for air. They asked if I was okay. I told them I'd gotten off trail and had to push through some rough terrain. They accepted that explanation, wished me well, and continued on their hike. I kept moving, not quite running anymore, but walking as fast as I could, constantly checking behind me. I reached the trailhead parking lot 20 minutes later. The White Parks Department truck was gone. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, doors locked, catching my breath, trying to process what had happened. Then I drove to the nearest ranger station, about 15 miles away, and reported everything. The ranger on duty listened patiently as I described the truck, the clipboard, with names, the side trail, the man in the clearing. He pulled up records on his computer while I waited. "We don't have any maintenance scheduled for Ridgeline Trail today," he said. "And all our vehicles have GPS tracking. None of them have been in that area." "But I saw the truck," I insisted. "It had your logo, government plates. Can you describe it?" I detailed the vehicle, the older model, the rust, the condition. His expression changed. "That sounds like one of our decommissioned vehicles," he said slowly. "We retired several trucks from the 80s about 10 years ago. Sold them at auction. Someone could have bought one and kept the decals." "So, someone's impersonating park staff?" "Possibly," he said. "Or you encountered someone with a surplus vehicle who was just confused or lost. Did he threaten you directly?" I hesitated. How could I explain what I'd experienced without sounding delusional? "He was strange," I finally said, acting like he was part of some program, talking into a radio that wasn't connected to anything. The clearing changed somehow. The trail entrance disappeared. The ranger's expression became more skeptical. "Trail entrances don't disappear," he said gently. "It's easy to get disoriented in dense forest, especially if you're already anxious. The mind can play tricks." "This wasn't my imagination," I said firmly. "Something wrong is happening on that trail. That man has been documenting hikers for months. I saw the lists." "I'll send a patrol to investigate," the ranger promised. "Check the area you described. Look for any unauthorized trails or activity. Can you mark on this map approximately where you encountered this?" I tried to indicate the location but realized I couldn't pinpoint it exactly. The side trail had been unmarked. The junction where I'd found the truck wasn't on the official map. The ranger took my contact information and said they'd follow up. I left feeling like he thought I'd either panicked over nothing or made the whole thing up. 3 days later, the ranger station called me back. They'd sent 2 staff members to search the area I'd described. They found the junction where I said the truck had been parked, found tire tracks, found evidence of a vehicle having been there recently. But they couldn't locate the side trail. They searched for over 2 hours, covering a half-mile radius around the junction. Found no beaten paths, no crude markers, no clearings, nothing matching my description. The ranger I spoke to was apologetic, but firm. "I believe you encountered something unusual," he said. "The tire tracks confirm someone was there, but whatever trail you followed either doesn't exist anymore or was somewhere else. We've documented everything we found. If you remember any additional details, or if this person appears again, please contact us immediately." I thanked him and hung up. I haven't been back to that trail since, haven't been hiking alone anywhere since, because I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. There's someone, or something, using an old Parks Department truck to access trails, creating unauthorized paths, documenting hikers, selecting certain people for something. And the most disturbing part? That clipboard in the truck had dozens of names on it. Months worth of documentation. Which means I wasn't the first person to follow those markers. I was just the first person who made it back to the main trail. The others? I don't know what happened to them, and I don't want to find out. I've hiked the San Bernardino trails for 5 years, and I thought I knew every fork and switchback on the mountain ridge path. That confidence nearly cost me everything. It was a Thursday in October, mid-afternoon, and I'd taken a half-day from work to squeeze in a quick solo hike before the weekend crowds arrived. The weather forecast showed clear skies, temperatures in the low 60s, perfect conditions. I started at the Rimrock trailhead around 2 p.m., planning a simple 8-mile loop that would have me back at my car before sunset. The first 3 miles went exactly as expected. Moderate elevation gain, well-maintained path, occasional views of the valley below through breaks in the pine coverage. Around the 4-mile marker, I reached an intersection I'd passed dozens of times before. 3 trails diverged from a small clearing, each marked with color-coded blazes on the trees. I needed the blue route, which would take me along the ridge before looping back down. But something was different. Someone had spray-painted over the trail markers, not random graffiti, but deliberate coverage that made it impossible to tell which path was which. Fresh paint, still slightly tacky when I touched it. I pulled out my phone to check the GPS map I'd downloaded. No signal, which was normal for this elevation, but the offline map wouldn't load. The app kept crashing every time I tried to open it. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, trying to remember the correct fork from previous hikes. I was 70% sure the middle path was the blue route, so I committed and kept moving. The trail seemed right at first. Same type of terrain, same gradual incline. But after about 20 minutes, I started noticing the path was less maintained than it should have been. More overgrowth, fallen branches that hadn't been cleared, sections where the trail almost disappeared entirely. I checked my watch, 4:30, Still plenty of daylight, but I was definitely off route. I decided to backtrack to the intersection and try a different fork. That's when I saw the camp. 20 feet off the trail, partially hidden behind a cluster of manzanita bushes, someone had set up a primitive shelter. Not a tent, but a tarp structure tied between trees. Scattered around it were empty food containers, a sleeping bag, and several plastic water jugs. The site looked recently occupied. A metal coffee cup sat on a flat rock, still containing dark liquid. The sleeping bag wasn't rolled up or packed away. I felt my stomach tighten. This wasn't a typical backpacker's setup. It was too concealed, too intentionally hidden from the trail. And backpackers don't vandalize trail markers. I turned to head back down the path, moving faster now, and that's when I heard a voice. "You lost?" A man stood on the trail about 30 yards downhill from me, blocking the direction I needed to go. He was maybe 50, wearing dirty cargo pants and a stained jacket despite the warm temperature. His hands were empty, but his posture was tense, alert. "No, I'm good," I called back, trying to sound casual. "Just heading back down." "Trail's closed ahead," he said, moving a few steps closer. "Washout damaged the path. You need to take the western fork back at the junction." I didn't respond. There was no western fork, only 3 paths at that intersection, and he just confirmed he knew the trail system, which meant he likely knew exactly what he'd done to those markers. "Appreciate the heads up," I said, and started walking directly toward him, maintaining confident body language even though my pulse was hammering. He didn't move aside. "You shouldn't be wandering off trail," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "Easy to get hurt out here, real easy." I stopped about 15 feet from him, recalculating. Going back uphill wasn't an option. The terrain got steeper and more remote in that direction. I needed to get past him. "I'm meeting my boyfriend at the trailhead in 20 minutes, I lied. "He's probably already there waiting. We have a dinner reservation at 6. Something shifted in his expression. Not fear, but recalculation. He was deciding something. "Better hurry then," he finally said, and stepped to the side of the trail. I walked past him, keeping him in my peripheral vision, forcing myself not to run. Every muscle in my body was screaming to sprint, but I knew showing fear might trigger him to act. I made it about 50 yards before I heard him moving behind me. Not running, but following, maintaining distance, but definitely tracking my movement. I picked up my pace, speed walking as fast as I could without breaking into a run. The trail descended steeply here, loose rocks making each step precarious. Behind me, I could hear him matching my pace. Still not running, but not falling back either. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was closer now, maybe 30 yards back, and he was no longer pretending this was coincidental. He was pursuing me. I abandoned any pretense and ran. The trail was too dangerous for a full sprint, but I pushed as hard as I could, jumping over exposed roots, using trees to steady myself on sharp turns. My backpack slammed against my spine with each stride. I could hear him running now too, no longer bothering to disguise his intent. The trail finally leveled out, and I recognized a distinctive rock formation that meant I was about a mile from the intersection. If I could reach that clearing, I might encounter other hikers. My lungs were burning, but I pushed harder, pulling ahead slightly. I could still hear him behind me, but the sound was getting slightly more distant. Then I heard voices ahead, real voices, multiple, people talking and laughing. I rounded a bend and nearly collided with a group of 3 hikers coming up the trail. 2 men and a woman, all in their 60s, moving at a leisurely pace. "Whoa, you okay?" one of them asked, seeing my expression. I stopped, gasping, and turned back. The trail behind me was empty. He'd vanished the moment he'd heard other voices. "There's a man," I managed between breaths, "following me, up the trail. He has a camp hidden in the woods." The three of them took me seriously immediately. One of them had a satellite communicator, a device specifically for emergencies in areas without cell coverage, and he activated it to contact park services. They walked me back to the trailhead, staying grouped tightly together, alert for any sign of the man. We didn't see him again. Rangers met us at the parking area 40 minutes later. I gave them the location of the hidden camp and described the man. They took detailed notes, but didn't seem particularly surprised. One of the rangers told me they'd been looking for someone matching that description, a wanted individual who'd skipped a court date 3 months earlier on assault charges. He'd been spotted in the national forest several times, but had always disappeared before they could locate him. They found his camp the next day, but he was gone. He'd cleared out completely, leaving almost nothing behind. I still hike those trails, but never alone anymore. And I carry a satellite emergency beacon now, because cell phones aren't enough when someone doesn't want you to find your way out. The rescue team told me we did everything wrong, and they were absolutely right. My college roommate Derek and I had planned this trip for months. The Angels Peak Traverse in New Mexico, a challenging 14-mile route that would take us across exposed ridgelines with views stretching for miles in every direction. We started early on a Saturday in June, hitting the trailhead just after dawn. The temperature was already climbing toward what would be a scorching afternoon, but we'd packed plenty of water and electrolyte tablets. Derek had done more research than I had. He'd downloaded the route, checked recent trip reports, even contacted someone who'd completed the traverse the previous week to ask about current conditions. The first 6 miles were demanding but manageable, steady elevation gain through juniper and piñon pine, eventually breaking above the tree line onto the exposed ridge. The views were incredible, exactly what we'd hoped for. We stopped for lunch around noon at a flat section of the ridge, sitting on sun-warmed rock while we ate sandwiches and checked our progress. We were making good time, actually ahead of our planned schedule. "Should hit the summit in another 2 hours," Derek said, studying his GPS watch. "Then it's all downhill to the second trailhead where we parked your car." We'd shuttled vehicles that morning, leaving my SUV at the endpoint and driving together to the start in Derek's truck. Standard procedure for a point-to-point hike. The trail got more technical after lunch. Narrower path, loose rock, significant exposure on both sides in some sections. Nothing that required climbing gear, but you had to pay attention to every step. We were about a mile from the summit when Derek stopped abruptly ahead of me. "There's a couple up here," he called back. "They look stuck." I caught up to find Derek talking to 2 hikers, a man and woman probably in their early 30s. The woman was sitting on the trail, her face pale despite the heat, cradling her left arm against her chest. "She slipped about 20 minutes ago," the man explained. "Caught herself, but I think she broke her wrist. We've been trying to decide whether to go forward or back." Derek knelt down to look at her arm without touching it. Even I could see the swelling around her wrist and the unnatural angle it was bent at. "Do you have cell service?" I asked, already knowing the answer. We were on an exposed ridge, time 0.3s, but this area was notorious for dead zones. The man shook his head. "Nothing. We've been checking every few minutes." Derek and I exchanged looks. The summit was close, and we might get service from the peak, or the descent on the other side might take us into coverage. "What's closer?" Derek asked them. "Your starting trailhead or the end point?" "We started where you're headed," the woman said through gritted teeth. "We're doing the reverse direction, so for us, going back the way we came is shorter." "For us," I said, "continuing forward is shorter." We came up with a plan. Derek and I would push ahead to the summit, try to get a signal and call for help, then continue down to the end point where we had a vehicle. The injured woman and her partner would move as slowly as needed, back the way they'd come. We gave them some of our supplies, extra water, and our first aid kit. And Derek helped the man fashion a better sling for her arm using a spare shirt. If we get through to emergency services, I told them, we'll send help back this direction too. They thanked us, and we split up. Derek and I made the summit in 45 minutes, moving faster now with purpose. We both pulled out our phones at the peak. Nothing, no signal at all. It'll come back on the descent, Derek said, but he sounded less confident than before. We started down the far side of the mountain, checking our phones obsessively every few minutes. The trail here was steeper, rockier, requiring more concentration. That's probably why Derek didn't see the loose section until it was too late. I was about 10 feet behind him when I heard the rocks shift. A whole section of the trail just gave way under his weight, and he went down hard, sliding about 15 feet down a steep scree slope before he managed to stop himself. "Derek!" I shouted, scrambling to the edge but not trusting the stability enough to follow. "I'm okay," he called back, but his voice was tight with pain. "Just give me a second." He tried to stand and immediately collapsed back down. Even from where I was, I could see his right ankle was already swelling. This was bad. This was very bad. I carefully worked my way down to him using a different route, testing every step. His ankle wasn't just sprained, it was clearly broken. He couldn't put any weight on it at all. "We need to keep moving," he said, trying again to stand with my help. "We have to get down to get a signal." It took us 3 hours to cover the next mile. 3 hours of Derek leaning heavily on me, hopping on his good leg, having to rest every 20 or 30 yards. His face was gray with pain and exhaustion. The sun was setting, and we were nowhere near the trailhead. We'd covered maybe a third of the descent. "We need to stop," I finally said. "We can't do this in the dark. Not safely." Derek didn't argue. He was beyond arguing. We found a small alcove formed by an overhanging boulder just off the trail, enough space for both of us to sit with some protection from the wind that was picking up as the temperature dropped. Neither of us had planned for an overnight stay. We had one emergency Mylar blanket between us, minimal food, and our water was running low. The night was long and cold. We huddled together under the Mylar blanket, taking turns trying to sleep while the other stayed alert. Derek's ankle had swollen to nearly twice its normal size, and I could tell he was fighting serious pain even though he tried to hide it. "That couple," he said sometime around midnight. "They're probably out by now. They probably got help." "Definitely," I agreed, though I wasn't sure at all. We started moving again at first light, but Derek had deteriorated overnight. He was weaker, slower, and I was terrified he was going into shock. Around 8 a.m., we heard the helicopter. It was distant at first, but clearly getting closer, following the ridgeline. I used my Mylar blanket to signal, waving the reflective surface to catch the sunlight. They spotted us within minutes. The rescue team had been dispatched at dawn after the couple we'd helped made it out last night, and reported there were other hikers on the trail who'd been trying to get help. Derek was airlifted out first. Broken ankle, severe dehydration, early stage hypothermia. I was flown out on the second trip. The search and rescue coordinator told us we were lucky. Lucky the couple made it out. Lucky they reported our position. Lucky the weather held. But mostly, he said, we were stupid. Stupid for not carrying a satellite communicator or emergency beacon. Stupid for assuming cell service would be available. Stupid for not bringing overnight gear on a trail that remote. He was right about all of it. We'd prepared for the hike we planned, not the emergency we encountered. Derek spent 2 days in the hospital. His ankle required surgery and months of physical therapy. We both have satellite beacons now, and we never hike without gear for an unplanned night out, no matter how confident we are about the route. Because wilderness emergencies don't check your itinerary before they happen. Those were 3 true hiking trail nightmares. If you have your own story, share it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Stay safe out there.